Righty. Hi, Charlene. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to connect with you, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join. And I'm excited to dive into our conversation today.
Yeah, I am too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get started, you let me know of your walk-up song, "Big Energy" by Lotto. I'd love to
Yes,
understand
yes.
why that song's important to you, why that's your song as you walk up to the metaphorical plate, and we can go from
Yeah.
there.
Well, it's actually it's my walk-up song when I give a keynote. It's full of energy, and it's also a really, if you listen to it, it's an empowerment song, and I'm really all about empowerment and owning your superpower. And so it's just one of those songs that kind of gets people up and excited and happy. Yeah, so that's been my walk-on song for a better part of a year now.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I'm excited to share more of your story, and maybe for the folks listening that haven't had the opportunity to hear about your amazing experiences, maybe if you could give us the quick primer on Charlene, the quick nutshell explanation who you are, what you're doing today, and then we can walk through your story a little bit further. But
Yeah, so I am a recovering C-suite executive. So I was in the corporate world for about a little over 30 years, about 33 years. And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with cancer for the second time, and went through all of the things that you go through when you've gone through a serious cancer battle. And when it was all said and done, I thought that I'd return to my high-powered, high-stress, high-achieving corporate job. And I realized that through the process of cancer, that I had become a different person. And I no longer wanted to be that person anymore, the uber achiever, I guess. And I really wanted to live more of my life of purpose. And so today I am an author, I am a keynote speaker, and a leadership coach and advisor.
that's quite a story, and I'm interested to learn more. So, I guess off the bat, do you think you would have come to that realization had you stayed on your kind of C-suite trajectory, and had you not had that tragic and scary cancer run-in for the second time?
No, I don't think I would have changed my life at all. In fact, I think I probably would have been one of those people that died at their desk practically, because I didn't, as you heard me say, I was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. The first time I was diagnosed with cancer was 6 months earlier, and I almost ignored it. I had surgery. I was back at work a week later. So I was a high achiever, and that was just that's who I was. That's what I was focused on. And so I'm confident if I hadn't been forced to make a pivot, that I would still be doing that. And I probably would be somewhat miserable, but maybe I wouldn't even know I was miserable. I would just know I wasn't happy.
Certainly. And I mean, taking that leap of faith, you had that experience and the health scare that really kind of was the driver for that realization for you. But I'm sure you face it all day long in your day-to-day now as a keynote speaker and answering questions about your autobiography. But think about how many people are at their desk today, and maybe even listening to this podcast, and are in that same headspace around not really feeling like there's an end in sight for their 9 to 5. And so maybe what would be your initial feedback for the folks listening around how to break the chains, if you will, and get out of that kind of cycle of the day-to-day monotony?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I ask my coaching clients, and I often have both male and female, executives that come to me, and they're successful. They're looking to go to that next level, and they usually hire a coach, or they hire me to help them get there. And one of the first questions that I ask is, are you achieving to this next level because it's something you want, or are you doing it because it's something you think you should want? And I really ask them to think about that question before we even start down the path. Because for so many people, especially if you're an achievement junkie, and if you're if you're a woman, and I think men suffer from this as well, but if you're a woman and you've been achieving for so long, you don't stop to ask yourself, is this actually what I want? Right? Or is it what I think I'm supposed to want? Therefore, I'm going for it. And I would say probably half the time, at least, my clients will come back and say, you asked me that question, and I realized that I'm happy where I am now. So how do I just build a better life? Right? How do I stay in my position, but build a better life? And, the other thing, I happen to believe a lot in the somatic connection, the connection between your mind and body. And for me, my body told me well before the second cancer diagnosis that I needed to do something different. And so I really encourage people to listen to what's happening inside them and listen to those cues. Because, I was fortunate in a way that I had cancer and didn't have a stroke or a heart attack or something else that's even harder to come back from sometimes. So I always try to encourage people to really think about what you want, not what you think you should want.
Absolutely. And how do you do that today, even in your kind of new life, if you will? How are you able to leverage that somatic connection and making sure that you're listening to your body and in tune with where you need to be and what is right for you? What do you do in your day-to-day now to keep that connection alive and well?
Yeah, well, for one thing, I pay attention. I pay attention to what my mind and what my body is telling me when I get up every morning. The thing about having cancer is you might be in remission, but you don't ever not have cancer, right? I mean, it can come back on any given day. And so for me, I listen to, how do I feel when I wake up in the morning? Am I tired? I pay a lot of attention to how I spend my time and who I spend my time with. There are people who give me energy, there are people who take energy, right? And that's not necessarily good for you. I take walks, I exercise, and I don't push myself. I don't overly push myself as I used to. It's like I'd work till midnight because I could. And I enjoyed what I was doing, but that's not a healthy life, right? And the idea is to have, a good life and having a lot of stuff, which is what working a lot gets you, right? The money, so you can buy a lot of stuff, but having a lot of stuff doesn't give you a good life, and for me, I'm one of those people that believes if something bad happens to you and you overcome it, you have a responsibility to make it something positive for other people. And so that's what I feel like I'm doing with my life every day.
I really like that a lot. That's interesting. I guess to your point about paying attention to your body, how you're feeling when you wake up in the morning, are you a person that meditates? Are you a person that goes through any sort of daily check or balance to make sure you're in tune, or what does that look like for you in an applicable way?
Yeah, I'm not big on meditation. I can't meditate for, an hour and sit still and not say a word. I wish I could, but I can't. But I have meditation moments, I would say, during the day. I'll stop myself from sitting at my computer for 6 straight hours. I'll sit here for a couple of hours and then I'll go play with one of my dogs outside, or I'll just take a breath. I do a lot of breathing exercises to keep me centered, especially before I speak or before I am with a client. I'll do that quite a bit, and and this is going to sound a little funny, I know, but I don't wear shoes a lot anymore. I mean, I'm a fiend. I have a couple hundred pairs of shoes. I love shoes, but if I'm home, I try not to, so that when I go outside, I'm connecting with the ground. And it, as crazy as it sounds, it really does kind of stabilize you and creates a foundation. So I'm just really intentional about my life, about my time, about everything that I do. And I was not intentional in the same way before.
Certainly. As it relates to grounding and some of these principles that you're talking to, do you
Mhm.
have a set reading list you focus on? Do you have other mentors or advisors that you lean on for these learnings, or what's your training these days?
Well, as a coach, I happen to be a part of a community of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches. And the thing about other coaches, I mean, I've written one book. I don't have plans to write another book. Coaches write books all the time. So I have stacks and stacks of books to read, to go through. But and beside that, I'm a big reader. I'm always interested in certain principles. I'm very much interested in Buddhist principles. Now I am a woman of faith. And so if I say, is there one thing that I rely on every single day, it's my faith. It's my faith that pulled me through cancer. It's my faith that leads me to believe that it's my job to do something positive with it. And it's my faith that keeps me working in my purpose, even if it doesn't feel like things are going my way sometimes. I know what I know what I'm meant to do. I know why I'm here, and I take that pretty seriously. And I think you said you've read some of my things, my stuff. I'm all about, my mantras are, you are enough. It's choice, not chance, that changes your life. And with 7 seconds of courage, you can start to do anything. And so I try to live that every day, especially it's choice, not chance.
I mean, it's choice, not chance was really, like I mentioned before we started recording here, was the kind of main driver for me reaching out in the first place. And obviously this is the reason for everything podcast. So a lot of parallels there. And so was that a principle that you have been thinking about for a while, even before jumping out of corporate life, or has that been something that has guided you through your whole corporate career? When did you really start to kind of resonate and lean into that mantra?
When I was 12 years old, actually. Really? Yes, it's, I think we all have pivotal moments and pivot points in our lives. One of mine was when I was 12 years old. And while I didn't have the idea that it's choice, not chance, that changes your life, I knew that the importance of choice and making choices. And I'd say throughout the rest of my life, I have experienced life when I've made an intentional choice, and I've experienced life when I left it to chance. And it worked for a while. And then ultimately, it's led me back to this point of it is choice, not chance, that changes your life, that changes everything. And the more we recognize when we are in a pivotal moment and that we have the ability to make a choice, is when we then start to have agency and power and control and influence over our own lives. And so for me, and just to kind of back up, so this makes a little bit of sense. I was when I was 12, I tried out for cheerleader at my junior high school, and I thought I was really good, but I didn't make the team. And later the instructor, or the sponsor, because they weren't called coaches then, the sponsor put me on the team, but she had told me that that at first I didn't make the team because I was Black, and she thought I'd be a troublemaker. And so that imprinted on the rest of my life. And it was then I knew that I had a choice to make. I could be who she just told me I was, right? And who she expected me to be, or I could make a choice to be different, to be something different, to be who I thought I was inside. And that really set me on a course of a life of choice.
Super fascinating. It goes back to your point earlier about paying attention to yourself, your mind, your body, being intentional, and being able to recognize, to your point, when those pivotal moments are happening. But I feel like a lot of times those fly by for a lot of people if you're not living a life of intentionality and paying attention to what's actually what you're actually feeling in your body and in your mind. And so how do you recognize, probably a little bit harder for a 12-year-old than it is for you now, but how do you recognize when you're in one of those inflection points? Obviously there's 20/20 hindsight that always will tell you when something was happening, but what's your kind of guiding principle for recognizing when you're in one of those kind of key points of inflection?
It's hard to describe. It's just that you know it when you're in it. And for me, of course, I didn't have all this wisdom at 12 or at 20 or 30 or 40 for that matter. It really all came together when I was going through my cancer journey, and I could go back through my life, because one thing that we do when we think we're going to die is you kind of sum up your life and you think about it. And I thought back about what were those inflection points in my life. And some of them I really, I didn't know I was in it at the time. But looking back, I could see it so clearly. And I could see that I had moments where I could have taken a different path. And sometimes I think that I should have. But that's not the mindset that I was in. And that's one of the reasons why I speak about it so much now, is because I want people to think about those inflection points, those pivot points as they approach them. I didn't have someone whispering in my ear saying, oh, here's a pivotal moment, right? But if I can get people to start paying attention to, hey, I'm being told to go left and I feel like I want to go right, but the pressure is to go left. But make the choice that which is right for you. And that might be to go right. Right. And so I try to carry that message so people do recognize that they have choice and that they are in pivotal moments. Because often if someone doesn't point it out to us, or we don't hear it from someone else's story, we don't know that it's happening.
Right. Right. I feel like so much of the right decision, or what's what you feel is right, comes from gut instinct or intuition. I love any input or insight you have on those kind of areas of decision making or just living day to day.
Yeah, it's people have a hard time making decisions, and I don't really know why, because we always know what is the best decision for ourselves at that time, but we don't trust ourselves, or we're fearful, right? Fear is an incredible motivator to do absolutely nothing, right? And and so with making those choices and thinking about the right choice, I tell people, not making a choice is a choice, right? And it's a choice to stay exactly where you are. If you're in a situation that doesn't work, but you decide not to make a choice, then you're stuck in that situation. And also, if you make the wrong choice, it's going to come back to you, and you're going to have the opportunity to make that choice again. I truly, truly believe that. Let's say somebody offers you a job and it's paying you 50% more than what you're making today. And you say, hey, this is really great. I don't know about this company. I don't have a great feeling about them, but I like the money, right? I like the new title. So even though my gut is telling me this might not be right for me, I'm going to take that job. And so you take that job, and 6 months down the line, all the things that you thought were wrong with the company, you start to see that they are. So you have the opportunity to make a different choice, right? And the question becomes, do you make the choice? And that's where we get in trouble. We don't make the choice either because we're afraid, or we say, oh, it's not that bad, and before you know it, 3, 5, 10 years have gone by, and you're living a life that you don't want to be living. Right. And so it's, I just tell people, just make a decision, right? Just own it so that you can make a decision, so that you can own your life. That I can't underscore how important that is, because there are so many people who are stuck, right? They're just stuck, whether it's within themselves, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether it's a place, whether it's a state of mind, whatever it is, they're stuck. And I can't think of a lot of things that are worse than being stuck.
Certainly. And I've talked about it on this podcast before, but it's almost in line with that idea of like disharmony, that lack when you're not listening to your gut or your instinct,
Right.
what your fear, your what your worries might be, and the lack of decision making. When you're misaligned there, you have the disharmony. That's when people are feeling stuck, I feel like, a lot of times.
Oh, absolutely. And you know it because you start to, you might start to dream about something, right? Or, something, you hear something and it resonates with you in a way that it didn't resonate before. There are always signs around, right? But before I was diagnosed with cancer, the second time, because that was the aggressive cancer, I knew I wasn't well. I mean, I didn't feel well when I got up in the morning. I didn't feel well when I went to bed at night. I just didn't do anything about it, right? I chose, if you want to say make a choice, I chose to ignore it. But the thing about cancer is you really can't ignore that. But and there were signs. I was tired all the time. I was irritable. I just didn't feel like myself, right? And I was way out of harmony. I can't even talk about balance. I was just completely out of harmony with myself, with my values, with, the person that I wanted to be, the person that I was meant to be. And I had to correct that. Or I guess life corrected it for me.
So you mentioned feeling out of disharmony, not living up to the values that you had set for yourself. Did you recognize that in the moment, or is it retroactive looking back on it? Were you conscious of the disharmony in the moment, I guess is the question I have, or was it an aftermath?
I think to some extent I was aware of it, but I was also an achievement junkie. And the thing about achievement junkies is, their most powerful statement is, I will do this when, or I will be happy when. And it's usually that when is when I achieve this next thing, right? And I think a lot of achievement junkies confuse achievement with happiness. And I was right there, confusing. I thought achieving would make me happy. And so once I learned to kind of decouple that, but again, everything for me goes back to my cancer treatment. I mean, I was in treatment for 5 years, which is just crazy. And so I had a lot of time to reflect and to just really think about, was achieving worth my life, basically, because I truly do not believe that if I had been under less stress, that I would not have come down with cancer. I very much equate the two.
Back to what you're talking about earlier of the sonic connection as well. Interesting. Yeah. And then I guess to that end, was there a certain time in your treatment back where you really realized, where you knew you were on the mend, and it was really when you had that mind-body connection? Was there a time in your treatment where you knew you were crushing that thing and it was in the rearview mirror at a certain point, just given your kind of being tuned into your body?
Yeah, it's it's a little hard to explain because there is physical health and mental health.
Right.
And I often will say, one of the worst days of my life was when I was told I had cancer. And one of the other worst days of my life is when I was told I didn't have cancer anymore. Right. And the reason why I say that is because during that process of trying to get better, I had 9 surgeries in 3 years. And, I nearly died. I had blood transfusions. I mean, it was really crazy. And so once that was over, the physical aspect was over, I'd been sick so long, I only knew how to be a sick person. So I didn't actually know who I was anymore. So I had the fortune or misfortune of having to rediscover who I was. And so that really led me to being more intentional, more purposeful in what I do. You know, it's hard for me to say that cancer was a gift, because I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. But I have a life today that I never would have imagined having, to the positive. You know, I have a level of contentment that is impossible to get when you're an achievement junkie.
Certainly. And I've heard an amazing quote, something along the lines of, if you're a healthy person, you have all these wishes and dreams and aspirations. And if you're unhealthy, your only wish is to get healthy again.
Oh, exactly. And it is so true. I had not been sick before, and not like that. And you just don't know what you're in for, you know. And you think, you know, a lot of cancers are curable. My cancer supposedly was curable, but it nearly killed me a couple of times. And so you just your health is important, you know. And plus, you know, I didn't want to be one of those people who had all this money and then you retire and then 6 months later you're dead.
Right.
Right. And, you know, and I say it kind of in jest, but I know people who were that way, you know. And it's as my mother used to say, you know, the graveyards are full of indispensable people. You know, and we kind of like convince ourselves that, oh, I can't take that break. I can't do this, you know, this work won't get done or that won't get done. And the fact of the matter is that if I walked out the door when I was in corporate, if I walked out the door and got hit by a truck, a week later, the work would still get done. Right. And so, you know, perspective on life is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting reality about the indispensability of just about anyone and in the world today, as it relates to your job and what pays the bills, if you will. And I guess to that end, I know in some of my reading and research, you have some comments and thoughts on work-life balance. So would love to dive into that as a natural segue. So maybe I'll open the mic to you and hear any perspectives you have.
Yeah. You know, I think work-life balance is a load of crap. I don't think it exists. Right. You know, and the worst thing to me is that we all strive for it. Right. And it is an unachievable goal. Right. And we talked a little bit earlier about harmony, and I look for harmony. There are times in your life where your family needs you. There are times in your life where your job needs you. And, you know, the goal is to seek harmony and to figure out, you know, what works for you. And then don't apologize to other people for it. You know, it's kind of like people, you know, felt like, oh my gosh, I have all this help. You know, people are going to think I'm weak, or, you know, somebody else does things this way, et cetera. You know, stop judging yourself, especially for something that isn't even achievable. And, you know, I have not met in my 59 years of life, I have never met one person who said that they have balance in their life. Not one. Right. And there's a reason for that. It's because it doesn't exist. Right. So I tell people, stop striving for it and just recognize that the real goal is just to have harmony. Right. It's okay if you're overworking yourself for a little bit, or it's okay that you're spending more time with your family, you know, for a little bit, because you can. But this whole work-life balance thing, it is such a load of crap. I don't care what anybody says, and I cannot be convinced otherwise.
No, I resonate with it a lot. And there was a partner at my consulting firm I started at right out of school that harped on the same message and saying that work-life balance doesn't exist. It's about work-life integration. When you're fresh out of school or when you're busy on a project or what have you, that's the time to go heads down and really grind it out. And at a certain time, if you're busy with family stuff or dealing with your kids or whatever it might be, that's the ebbs and flows of the work-life integration. That's what she would call it, not work-life balance. But
yeah, over the years, people have come up with all these great terms like integration, you know, work-life choice. I've heard before. Yeah, and it's like, you know, they're all names for the same thing, which is, the fact that there really isn't, work life. And to your point about integration, I think more so now than ever before, our lives are just so entwined. I don't think you should have to keep your home life out of your work life and the other way around, right? Because you're one person, and it's exhausting to be one person at work and a different person at home. And for so long, that's what was required. Certainly as a Black female, that was absolutely what was required of me. And it's exhausting.
Mhm.
And, our lives are integrated. So let's just accept that and
Yeah.
make it work, figure out how to make it work for you, because it's not going to work the same for everybody.
Certainly. And you mentioned the point earlier about judging yourself, and that ties in obviously the title of your book. But I feel like that's a really overlooked thing in today's day and age, where you're thinking, oh, if I'm showing up late because I'm helping my grandmother do this or whatever the situation might be, everyone's in their own heads thinking that, oh, I'm going to get so much judgment from everyone else, where in reality, no one else really cares. It's really just you judging yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's true what we say, that often we are our worst critics. And the problem with being your worst critic is that after a while, you start believing that inner critic, right? Or even if you do have people around you who are critical, you start to believe what they say too. And you start telling yourself that. And before you know it, you're spending so much of your time trying to please everybody else. In my, and I think in my book or in one of my speeches, I talk all the time, it's like, stop trying to get everybody to like you when you don't even like everybody. Right.
Right.
So, but we are so critical of ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why the title of my book is You Are Enough, is because so many people walk around thinking I'm not enough of this, I'm not enough of that. This person says, I'm not good at this, or I'm not worthy of this, or I don't fit in here. And the fact of the matter is that you are enough. Yes, maybe there are things you need to learn. Maybe there are things you need to experience, but at your core, you're exactly who you need to be. It's just up to you as to what you do with that.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I get on my soapbox. Sorry about
that. No, I couldn't agree more. And I have the same conversation with my parents all the time about these sorts of things. I'm big into the speaking into existence and the law of attraction.
Oh yeah.
Really what I've been spending a lot of my time reading into and researching as of late. And so really resonate with all of that. And it's amazing the negative self-talk you hear just in the day-to-day, from day-to-day office life, we're watching professional sports or college sports on TV, hearing athletes talk about it and talk about themselves or professionals talk about themselves, and really emphasizing on the positive self-talk, I feel like is a really underrated exercise for everybody.
Absolutely. My husband, he's in finance. And so he's thinks like a person who's in finance. And I tell him all the time that there are things that I am manifesting, into existence, that I am manifesting into my life. And he makes fun of me because he says that's just such a crackpot thing. But I actually believe that. I believe that the energy you put out is the energy that comes back to you. And I do believe that you can manifest things into your life. And so just kind of building on what you were saying, I think that's so true, but I know for a lot of people, they don't, but I don't know. I have living proof. I think I am living proof. So
wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think that for people that don't believe it, it's hard to understand. It sounds like a lot of voodoo nonsense, but I think that, but I think that once you have some tangible examples,
yeah, my dog is agreeing with you. I don't know
I guess to that end though, so back in 2017 to now, in all of the changes that have happened since then, what was that? I mean, you're talking about manifesting and speaking into existence, different things in your life, in getting into the author realm and starting your speaker circuits and journeys. What was that experience like? What was the transition from corporate life to your new world like? Was that a situation where you were sitting down, thinking methodically about where you wanted to go with your career next and where you wanted to evolve, or who you wanted to evolve into as it relates to the kind of post-corporate world? Or what was that journey like for you after a couple of decades really of corporate work?
Right. It was really hard. It was extremely hard because I had spent, in climbing the corporate ladder, I had spent more than 20 years creating the right persona to be successful in corporate America. And when I got sick and it continued on and on and on, I lost that persona. And so I had to figure out who I was, because I wasn't this, what I kind of call the perfect Black female executive, right? That's what I had become. But all of that was stripped away. And, as I said, I believe that if something bad happens to you, you turn it into something positive for someone else. And so I didn't ever, for me, ask God why I had cancer. I just said, if I live through this, please tell me what I'm supposed to do with it. Right. And so I knew that I had to leave corporate because I just couldn't do it any longer. And that physically, mentally, the whole thing, I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the stamina, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And I woke up one day and I thought, I'm supposed to write a book. And I thought, but I don't know how to write a book. I've never thought about writing a book before. What am I going to write a book about? And I had gone to New York on the train, and I ran into a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time at the train station. And I said, what have you been up to? And he said, I just finished writing a book and published a book. I said, you're kidding. How did that happen? And so he connected me with his people. And so I was able to write this book and get it published. And then as I was doing a lot of the promotion for the book, the people would start asking me to come speak for the book, about the book. And it was bigger and bigger audiences. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to share this message about what it's like climbing the ladder as a Black female, in an environment that was not built for you. And how can I take what I went through and turn those lessons and turn them into strategies for other people? And as I was out talking more, then people would ask me if I coached. And I said, no, I'm not a coach, and at that time, my experience with coaching had always been punitive, not developmental. And so, I said no. And enough people asked that my husband said, why don't you look into coaching, and be the kind of coach that you think should be out there? So I did. And then I ended up getting certified and, and all of these things. So my point is that once I listened to God or my purpose or the higher power, whatever people believe in, everything else unfolded in front of me. Right. And so I'm a firm believer, whether you want to call it purpose, whether you want to call it your values, when you're on the right path, things unfold in front of you. And so with cancer, I had been taken down to a position of a point where I didn't know who I was anymore. I'd looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. I'd always been this achiever, and all of a sudden I didn't want to achieve, and it's like, what do you do with that? And so I just slowly had to come back to who I was. And it was hard. It took a few years, and and even still now I'll hear a friend got this great big promotion and I think, oh, I would have loved to have had that job. But then just as quickly as I have the thought, I'm like, no, I wouldn't have wanted it. So it was a lot of soul searching, but it was a lot more of being patient and waiting for things to appear rather than trying to force it. If you had told me 6 years ago that I'd be a coach, that I'd be a public speaker and that I would have written a book, I would have told you that you'd lost your mind.
Right.
I said, there is no way I would be doing those things. But now I get to take my experience, life and business experience, and message and share that with other people, and hopefully they can avoid it. They don't have to wait until they're, 53 or 54 to start to try to figure out who they are.
Certainly.
Maybe they can start it at 34.
Certainly.
Yeah.
You mentioned this in terms of the achiever in you. No worries at all. You mentioned in terms of the
I don't know if it's a UPS man or what.
No problem. Like I said, after a couple of years of the pandemic Zoom calls, I feel like there's no need to apologize for dogs or kids or what have you running in the background. But you mentioned this in terms of the inherent achiever in you or success junkie in you, hearing about a promotion and yearning for a second and then snapping back into it. But obviously you still have that fire in you to achieve and succeed, and it looks different, and the rigor of it is different today for you, but you're still to grow and spread your message that you've worked so hard at. So to that end, how do you think about goal setting and achievement and just like really kind of just staying motivated for whatever that motivation is? What does that look like to you today in this kind of entrepreneurial lifestyle you're living now?
Yeah, well, my goals now are huge, right?
I'd love to hear. I'd love to unpack.
Well, it's huge, and it's not even, it's not something I can put a KPI to necessarily, right? Because I have had this lived experience and this wisdom, and my goal is to share my message of choice and empowerment and, self-worth as broadly and as widely as I possibly can, right? The more people I reach, the more I'm reaching my goal. And so all of that energy for achieving, something, now what I want to achieve is just spreading my message to people, right? And watching them take that message and be empowered to do something that they couldn't do before, or that they didn't believe in themselves enough to do. And so that's what my achievement now is about. Other people. It's about what can I help enable other people to do, to become. It's not what can I personally achieve. And so that's the difference now. So I'm a different kind of achievement junkie.
No, that's terrific. That's true. And it goes back to what you mentioned earlier, and there's a lot of ties back into the Christian faith and the Buddhist faith and all of these religions and spirituality disciplines and what have you, where the acts of service and the ability to help others, if you can figure out what that activity is that you can help others with, and that's how you try to find your true, whether it be your dharma you want to call it, or your true calling, or your passion, your purpose, whatever it is to you. And all of these in all of these teachings, learnings, it always goes back to, if you can figure out what it is that you can help others with, that's how you can recognize and kind of achieve your higher purpose, if you will.
Yeah. And, it's funny because when I started on this journey, as an entrepreneur, which is not something I ever aspired to either. I kind of liked knowing what that I was going to get paid when and exactly how much it was going to be. So, but I was talking with Marshall Goldsmith, the well-known coach, and I was telling him that I was having a really difficult time marketing myself, right? Because I just found that really hard to do. And so, he said to me, Charlene, it's not about marketing yourself. Is that you have something and other people need to hear it. And if you don't put yourself out there, then you're depriving people of hearing who really need it to hear that message.
Interesting.
And I just thought that was such an interesting way to look at it, right? It was just, and again, here's Marshall Goldsmith, the one of the world's top coaches, crossing my path, sharing this piece of information with me. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, it's fascinating. That's fascinating. How do you apply that? I mean, for the 22-year-old or 23-year-old or even 30, 40-year-old listening to this that's sitting at sitting at their desk and really resonating with what we're talking about here, but they feel that those golden handcuffs that you mentioned earlier of loving to know when your paycheck's coming, how much it's going to be, and how you're going to apply that. What's the advice you might give to them in terms of just kind of realigning their mindset and their thinking from an achievement mindset to a kind of harmony mindset, to keep it the theme of what we've been talking about?
Sure. I think it goes back to the question I had asked earlier, which is, are you achieving because it's what you want, or are you achieving because it's what you think you should want? And I think it's worthwhile for everybody to ask themselves that question. And it's okay to achieve because that's what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But just make sure that it is what you want, and that you're not living a life that you don't want to be living. And we all have certain seasons. In your 20s is when you make all of your really silly mistakes. In your 30s is when you work hard and establish yourself in your career. In your 40s is when you really start to achieve what you're after. And then in your 50s is when you start asking yourself, was it all worth it? So, I don't think there's anything wrong with being an achiever if that's who you are. The problem is if it's not who you are and you're doing it, that's when the problem comes through. I'm trying to bribe my dogs.
No worries.
The one that's barking the most is deaf, so you can't even tell him to be quiet. So he's just living his best life.
he's making a choice.
Right, exactly. He's definitely not leaving it to chance.
No, certainly not. I guess to that end, do you have any maybe points of parting wisdom for the folks listening? Do you have any piece of advice, any parting messages? And just can't emphasize enough how grateful I am for you joining today, and for responding to a flyer LinkedIn message to get us connected.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you dealing with all of my distractions this evening and having you on. Parting words are really the things I mentioned earlier that I live by, and that are my mantras. And one is you are enough. And I don't mean that as just a pithy kind of throwaway saying. It's that, so many of us walk around thinking we don't measure up to something, and it impacts the decisions we make. It impacts everything we do. And if you start with a foundation of just understanding that you are enough, you can do anything. Secondly, of course, it truly is choice, not chance, that changes everything. It changes your life. It changes your work. It changes your leadership. It changes your relationships. It changes everything. And then lastly, which we didn't talk a lot about, but my other mantra of 7 seconds of courage. And with 7 seconds of courage, you can do anything, or you can start to do anything. And this really ties into fear, because we often don't do things because we're afraid. We're afraid of, people say things, well, the devil is better than the devil you don't know, right? They're saying, I would go do this just if, right? And the rest of that is if I weren't afraid. And what happens in our minds is that when we are thinking about doing something, the first 6 seconds are all emotion. Right. And that's where the fear and the feeling of you're in your fight or flight zone. But if you can get through those 6 seconds and get to the 7th, that goes away. And the other part of your brain opens up, and possibility opens up, and you can take action. And so that's what I would leave people with, is that with 7 seconds of courage, you can begin to do anything.
That's unbelievable wisdom, and I'm excited. Hopefully we can chat in person and do a live recording one of these days, and we can dive more into that last mantra there. But all just amazing advice. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Charlene, and hopefully everyone was able to grab some value out of this. I'll be sure to plug your book link and your socials in the show notes. And again, just thank you so much for your time, and it was great to connect with you today.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate being on.
Of course. Take care.